I am 86 years old, and the hardest thing I have ever had to admit, harder than burying my wife, harder than watching everything I built collapse, is this. For most of my life, I had no idea who I actually was. Not a clue. I thought I did. Lord, I thought I did. I had a name, Walter Grimes, a house on Birchwood Lane in Columbus, Ohio. Opinions about everything, politics, neighbors, the right way to raise children. I was certain about myself, the way only a man who has never truly been tested can be certain. Then life tested me, not once, not twice. Over 8 decades, life held up a mirror and said, "Walter, look, is that really who you think you are?" Most times, I looked away. That is the truth I am here to tell you today. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that sits in your chest like a stone and doesn't move until you deal with it. Here is what I know now at 86 that I wish someone had grabbed me by the collar and said, at 35, you are not who you think you are. You are who you are when no one is watching, when everything is falling apart, and when it costs you something to be good. Everything else is just a story you tell yourself. And if you still have time to change that story, you need to hear what I am about to say. Everything else is just a story you tell yourself. And if you still have time to change that story, you need to hear what I am about to say. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, 1940. The kind of neighborhood where everybody knew your name, your business, and your grandmother's business too. My father, Harold, was a quiet man, a machinist who came home smelling of metal shavings and never said much at the dinner table. My mother, Ruth, was the opposite. She talked enough for both of them, and she had a saying she repeated so often I stopped hearing it. Walter, a man's character is not what he claims. It's what he does when the claiming is over. I heard those words 1,000 times. I understood them 0 times. By 1962, I was 22, newly married to a woman named Diane. Dark hair, laughed like a screen door in summer, and I was absolutely convinced I was a good man, honest, hardworking, loyal. I said those words about myself the way some men say grace before a meal, automatically, without ever checking if they were true. We lived in a small apartment on Fulton Street. The kitchen wallpaper had little yellow roosters on it. I remember because I stared at those roosters every morning over my coffee, planning the life I was going to build. I was going to be somebody, prove something, though I couldn't have told you what or to whom. I worked my way up at a manufacturing firm. By 1971, I was floor manager with 12 men under me, respected, known. And I told myself that meant something about who I was. Then came the winter of 1974. The company was cutting positions. My supervisor, Gerald Holt, heavyset, always wore the same brown tie, called me into his office on a Tuesday afternoon. The radiator was hissing. The window behind him fogged with cold. He told me one of my men had to go. Budget cuts. He handed me the list. He told me to choose. 2 names at the bottom. Marcus Webb, 28 years old, wife pregnant with their 2nd child, and Roy Callahan, 54, no family to speak of, but 20 years with the company. I chose Roy. I told myself it was because Marcus had more years ahead of him, more options. I told myself it was the kind thing to do. But that was not why. The real reason, the one I didn't say out loud for 30 years, was that Marcus had recently filed a complaint against a supervisor I was friendly with. I was afraid. Afraid of what keeping him might cost me. Afraid of what Gerald Holt might think. Afraid of the wrong things for the wrong reasons, dressed up in the language of kindness. Roy Callahan was gone by Friday. He shook my hand on his way out. He said, "No hard feelings, Walter." I have thought about that handshake almost every week for 50 years. Before I go further, thank you to everyone who finds these stories and takes the time to listen. If this is reaching you, a like or a subscribe costs nothing and means everything to someone my age. Now, back to what happened. 12 years later, 1986. By most measures, I was doing well. House on Birchwood Lane, 2 kids, Thomas, 19, and Carol. Diane and I had built something real, or so I believed. Thomas was bright, stubborn like me. We fought the way fathers and sons fight when they are too similar to admit it. That summer, he told me he wanted to leave college and open a small print shop with a friend. He had a plan, he had savings, he had fire in his eyes. I told him no, foolish. He needed a degree, a stable job, a real path. He looked at me across that kitchen table, those same yellow roosters still on the wallpaper, we'd never changed them. And he said, "Dad, you always talk about being brave, but every decision you make is about being safe." I told him he didn't know what he was talking about. He left for California 3 months later. We didn't speak properly for 4 years. And sitting alone in that kitchen in 1987, staring at those yellow roosters, I finally heard my mother's voice. A man's character is not what he claims. It's what he does when the claiming is over. I had claimed to be brave, honest, a man of principle. But when it cost me something, when honesty meant admitting fear, when bravery meant letting my son take a risk I was too frightened to take myself, I folded every time. That was the moment I first understood the hard truth. I just wasn't ready to do anything about it yet. I spent the first 40 years of my life building an image. Honest Walter, dependable Walter, good Walter. I protected that image the way a man protects his house, kept the outside clean and never let anyone see the rooms I was ashamed of. But character is not an image. Character is what happens in the rooms you keep locked. The Roy Callahan decision, that was one of those rooms, a cowardly choice dressed in the language of compassion. Nobody called me out. Nobody knew, except me. Hey, if you're sitting there thinking this doesn't apply to you, listen carefully. The choices you make when no one is watching are the only choices that actually count. Every other choice is performance, and you can perform for a lifetime and die never having met yourself. Ask yourself today, what have you done lately that cost you something? Not money, not time. Something real, your comfort, your reputation, your safety. If you cannot answer that, you may be living a performance too. I told myself I chose Roy over Marcus out of kindness. I believed that story for 30 years. Told it to Diane once, in passing. She nodded and said nothing. I told it to myself every time the memory surfaced. It wasn't until 2004, retired, 64, with too much quiet and not enough distraction, that I finally sat down and examined it. Really examined it. And the truth came up like something long buried. I was afraid, plain and simple and ugly. I let a man lose his livelihood because of my fear. And I spent 3 decades calling it compassion. The stories we tell about ourselves are not neutral. They shape every decision that follows. Believe you are brave when you are not, and you will keep making a coward's choices and calling them something else. The most important conversation you will ever have is the one you have with yourself in the dark when the story finally falls apart. Are you having that conversation, or are you still protecting the story? Thomas told me the truth in 1986. I called it disrespect, the arrogance of youth. I sent him away with my pride intact and my growth arrested. He was right. Completely, painfully, exactly right. My neighbor, Estelle Marsh, 70 years old, and widowed, sharp as a tack, said something similar in 1991. We were talking over the fence and she said, "Walter, you know your problem? You'd rather be right than be real." I laughed it off. Changed the subject. Estelle died in 1998. I never told her she was right. Think about the people in your life who said something true and uncomfortable about you. What did you do with it? Did you hear it? Or did you dismiss it, defend yourself, and quietly avoid them afterward? The people who love you enough to tell you the truth are rare. Treat them like gold. The ones who only tell you what you want to hear are not your friends. They are your mirrors, and a mirror only shows you what you already believe. In 2005, I was 65. Thomas and I had slowly repaired things, the way you repair old furniture, carefully, imperfectly, with visible seams. I wrote him a letter that year, handwritten, 4 pages. I told him about Roy Callahan, about the fear I had carried, about how his words in 1986 had been right, and how I had spent 19 years being too proud to say so. He called the day he received it. He didn't say much. He said, "Dad, thank you." 2 words, 30 seconds. One of the most important moments of my life. I was 65 years old and finally, for the first time, being honest about who I had been. And in being honest about who I had been, I started becoming who I actually wanted to be. It is not too late for you. But understand this. Every year you spend protecting the false version of yourself is a year you cannot get back. I lost 19 years between Thomas's words and my letter. 19 years of a closer relationship. 19 years of being known. Don't wait 19 years. Don't wait 19 months. Start the conversation today. Here it is. Plain as I can make it. You are not who you think you are. You are who you are when it costs you something. In the locked rooms, in the quiet decisions, in the moments when being good is inconvenient, when honesty is dangerous, when being brave means losing something you want to keep. That is you, the real you. And most of us have spent our entire lives running from that person, dressing up fear as wisdom, cowardice as caution, selfishness as practicality. I did it for 40 years. Now here is the second wave, the one I held back until now because it is the hardest to say. The life you are living right now is the result of who you have actually been, not who you claim to be, who you actually were. Look at your relationships, your regrets, the people you have lost and the opportunities you have buried. That is the autobiography of your real character, not the story you tell, the life you built. If you do not like what you see, change, not tomorrow, now. Because I am 86 years old and I am telling you with everything I have left. The clock is not waiting for you to feel ready. I still have a photograph of Roy Callahan. Found it in an old company newsletter from 1973. He's standing at his workstation, smiling at something off camera. A man who looks exactly where he belongs. I don't know what happened to him after 1974. I never looked. Maybe I was afraid of what I'd find. Maybe that's one more thing I need to be honest about. But I keep that photograph on my desk. Not as punishment, as a reminder that character is built or broken in the small moments. The Tuesday afternoon decisions, the conversations across kitchen tables, the letters written 19 years too late. You still have time to write yours on time. So here's what I want you to do today. Not someday. Today. Think of one person who told you a hard truth you dismissed. Reach out to them, not to argue, not to explain yourself, just to say, you were right, and I heard you. That is where it starts. That is where the real you begins to show up. Subscribe, not because I need the numbers. I'm 86. Numbers mean nothing to me, but because in a noisy world, you need a quiet place to be reminded of what is real. That is what this channel is. Come back whenever you need it. And leave me a comment below. Tell me this. What is one thing someone told you about yourself that you weren't ready to hear, but turned out to be true? I read every one, every single one. I'll leave you with this. The bravest thing you will ever do is stop pretending to be the person you wish you were, and start being honest about the person you actually are. That is not the end of something. That is the beginning of everything.